With me now is Carol Hamilton. She has been Poet Laureate of Oklahoma and has won the Oklahoma Book Award and is, I think, one of the best poets in Oklahoma.
Thank you.
And you have a new collection out. It's called Shots On, and it's really about women photographers.
It is, and photography in my own life as well.
Now, did you set out to write this collection, or did you just discover, I've got a lot of poems about photographs?
This one is one of the few. I've done a couple of books where I deliberately wrote them. One about Brahms and the Schumanns. And right after that, I had gone to the Margaret Bork White exhibit at the museum and wrote a poem about her. Went to the lecture about her and got really interested in her life. And I'm in a critique group, and they said, you need to do a book on early women photographers. I said, I don't know anything about them except Dorothea Lange, perhaps. But a friend of mine insisted and gave me a book on early women photographers and got me started, and I just had a delightful time researching and writing about these women.
Now, did you go through a book and say, this is the photograph I have to write about?
I read the book, and it was really partially the lives, partially the photographs that captured my interest. I began when the interesting thing about early women photographers was that they got into the art before anybody knew it was going to be an art.
Right.
And so that is how they were able to be artists where they weren't in other fields earlier. And I just realized that some of them did it because they were so poor on the frontier that it was a way to make a living, and others did it as a hobby. Most of them didn't think they were going to be artists, but that's what they ended up creating.
So you learned a great deal and created a beautiful collection here.
Well, thank you.
When I first opened it up, and I knew before you sent this copy to me that it was going to be about early female photographers, and I opened it up, and my first reaction before I read anything was, there are not any photographs in here. But when I started reading, I realized that you didn't need the photographs because you had the poetry to describe either a specific photograph or kind of the life of one of the photographers in here. And I think that was a kind of revelation that just because you're writing about something doesn't mean you have to have a photograph of it to tell you.
I often take the book to readings and try to get people to come up and look at the photographs. I've not succeeded yet, so I'm going to try again next Sunday.
How interesting. Well, I asked you before we got started here if you would like to read a poem, and I think between the two of us we chose a particular one here. So,
the one that we chose is one of the last ones of the early women photographers. I really quit about the Second World War because after that women weren't breaking new ground, but this woman, Toni Frizzell, went into the war zones and took photographs. This one is called The Face of War, and it's of a little boy come back to his home in London after he's lost his family while he was just out playing. Face of War. Toni Frizzell followed the battlefields of World War II. A target, she said, like a wooden duck in a carnival shooting gallery. The little boy come home from play in London, well bundled in 2 big clothes, stares at us from the rubble and the tomb of his home, his parents, his brother, his life. He stares at us forever. All her dangers bring us home, too, on our doorstep, the moment after some magician has pointed his wand, and poof, everything is gone.
do you just sit down and dash this off, or do you have to do a little work on it?
What I usually do is I write a poem every day, and I have a certain time first thing in the morning that I devote a certain amount of time to writing. And on this particular project, I would spend part of that time reading, and then I would start working on the poem. And of course, you have to go back later and do revision. but you get the first draft.
Right.
And writing every day, it makes it easier because you sit down and you're in the habit of doing that, and it comes.
Right. Oh, I have had a number of poets on who have collections, but they have not had the direction that you have had. It's kind of like, gee, I've been writing poems for about 3 or 4 years now. I think I could find enough of them to fill up a chapbook or something. Did you write poems that you did not use in this book?
I didn't. And actually, some of the ones from the last section were not written for the book. They were ones that had been published earlier and just seemed to fit the theme. But I somehow just came to the point where I felt like I was through. I just, and every one that I wrote, I used.
Well, that's being through. I think can be a tricky thing. When have I finished the book? Have I finished the poem? Have I finished the painting? I've had a lot of artists tell me that that's the most important thing to know about your craft, is when you're done.
It's so easy to go too far beyond and keep doing too much, and then not quite enough, and having to go back and fill in.
Right. Now, did you put the poems in the order that they are in?
I did. Yes. Yes, this, I usually get my books published by entering national contests, and then they are chosen to be published by them. So they usually do it the way you have it.
Right. So you actually have a lot more control over it than if a publisher came to you and said, we want X number of poems and we'll decide.
Yes, although my first books, Betty Shipley, who was poet laureate of Oklahoma too, did, and poor thing, she would say she would like to do one of my books, and I'd just bring her all these poems, and she'd pick out. So, oh, poor Betty.
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, that I think editing is part of that creative process of deciding, and I know often in the publishing world it does seem to be a joint project, but that's a very important thing to decide what to leave in, what to leave out, and do I need to make some changes here or there.
Right, and I changed this several times before this final version. So there is a lot of tinkering that goes on.
Right. Well, I think this is a lovely book. I enjoyed it very much, and I think it would inspire anybody who reads it to actually go to a photography show or check out some of those books on photography at the library and see what you're talking about.
I hope they will.
I think they will, and I look forward to having you on when you've got your next collection out.
Thank you. Always love to be here.
Thanks, Carol. We've had Carol Hamilton on talking about Shots On. You can find it at your library and your favorite bookstore.